Right, the morning after the Friday night session.
I have been fascinated by English traditional music for years and years.
I think I might be able to get Joe on board to play some bagpipes.
Because the source material is always weird, it's always strange. But that's kind of the fun of it. And I have been absolutely blown away by how much easier generative AI has made it. Hi, welcome if you're new, welcome back if not. In this video series, I do three things. 1, arrange and record music in my home studio in this narrowboat on the Thames. 2, plan and shoot music videos for that music. And 3, document how it went, what worked and what didn't. So strap yourselves in for the highest low stakes on the internet. I'm James Bell, and this is The Process. I'm really sorry. I've lured you here under false pretenses with the implication that I might be doing cover versions of songs that you like or even have heard of. Actually, it was just a bait and switch to give me the opportunity to nerd the fuck out about 19th century broadside ballads like this. Let me explain. Okay, so finally I get to play with traditional tunes. There will be a video somewhere around here which will explain my complicated relationship with folk music. See, the problem with filming in a museum is that even when it's empty, me standing here means that people walking by think, oh, something interesting's going on, and then they come in. So I kind of feel like I'm going to be hauled up on espionage charges. Anywho, trying to vlog in a museum in the middle of the summer holidays is like one of those dreams where you just really need a piss, and everywhere you go, someone appears out of nowhere. It appears to be quiet in the bling rooms. People don't seem to like bling. Let's do the bling rooms. Welcome to my bling. Oh yeah. Seat. Okay, so I was gonna do this bit in the museum, but this just isn't working. I'm like hiding in the corner, whispering into my phone. So, all right, nice idea in principle, but back to me in the studio. Okay, fair enough. Right. I have been fascinated by English traditional music for years and years. The song that I've picked is called Young Man Cut Down on His Prime. It's known by tons of different names. Probably The Unfortunate Rake is the most common name. But why this song particularly? I just find it's a really interesting broadside ballad. There's so much going on in this song. This song has apparently influenced so many other folk songs. Some you may have heard of if you've heard of the song House of the Rising Sun. That's apparently kind of at least influenced by this song. There's just a lot in there. Like to a certain extent, I haven't had the time and the bandwidth to really get stuck into adapting trad stuff for years. I cannot wait. But like, I'm not going to nerd out now. Like, trust me, there's a lot going on in this song. I'll kind of come back to it. The whole history of music is really too big a chocolate pudding to tackle in one go, so let's narrow it down. Our little history starts in England in the early 1500s. Music is generally not written down and stored because that's expensive. The church has been doing it for centuries, and from time to time, a wealthy patron might pay a composer for some bespoke music. Other than that, there wasn't much of it going on. Then two things happened that changed everything. The movable type printing press started to become affordable, and this bloke broke with the Church of Rome and declared himself head of the new Church of England. Now, the Vatican wasn't super happy with this, at first condemning him to hell through excommunication, and in later years pushing nearby countries like Spain to invade and reclaim England for Catholicism. Much of England was still devoutly Catholic, and this led the English crown to do something pretty desperate. Print the Bible in English and teach everyone to read it. Now, on the surface, this seemed like a good idea, because then everyone could see that much of what they'd been taught by Roman Catholicism wasn't actually backed up by the Bible. But it had one pretty big side effect for the English crown. Suddenly, you're ruling a population that can read. Sure, they can now educate themselves enough to see through the shenanigans of the Catholic Church of the day. But sooner or later, they'll start seeing through your shenanigans too, which is arguably what happened a century later in the English Civil War, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. One of the less violent outcomes of this English information revolution was the birth of a commercial, popular music business based on a product that would last right up to the late 1800s. The broadside ballad. Broadsides were the names given to single sheets of paper that were sold in many places but mainly on the streets. They might contain political rants, parodies, pornography, the same basic stuff that makes up much of the internet today. But of the broadsides that have survived, most are songs. A broadside seller would often stand in the street and sing, much like a modern busker, and their partner would go through the crowd and sell that song to passers-by. And probably pick your pocket if you're not paying attention. These broadside ballads would tend to have a woodcut image at the top, and the songs would be long with many verses, because the typeface size was small and fixed, and 3 verses followed by half a blank page just looks weird. And they would be just words, not music, because printing music notation as well would require a whole other printing block system. Under the ballad title, however, might be something like "To the Tune of the Three Ravens." These ballads started out as something of a luxury product, but quite quickly became mass entertainment and ended up becoming the musical equivalent of penny dreadfuls. And they were very popular in England, thanks to the high literacy, but they were popular wherever there were movable type printing presses, and it can often be difficult to be certain which country they truly originated in. For example, a song might have been written in Sweden and then travelled to Ireland with merchants who translated it, and then be first published in London. Unless we had detailed records of all of that, we'd tend to assume it originated in England. Eventually, printing got more sophisticated. Sheet music with both words and music overtook broadsides, and later still, recorded music eclipsed both of them. But from the early 1500s to the late 1800s, broadsides were the beating heart of English popular music. What I want to do is pick songs that say something about the world we live in at the moment, and I want to do a version of them with instruments which, if not historically accurate, are kind of historically accurate adjacent. But I also want to bring in elements of modern popular music as well. I want to try and make these songs accessible, because when I was trying to find out the culture that I came from, England and English culture and English music, I found it weird and alienating and impenetrable. And that's kind of understandable because, as that old saying, the past is another country. Like a lot of how things happen in the past are just kind of strange. What I want to try and do is translate that. I want to editorialize and explain what I think they mean. But yeah, that's the challenge for me. It's always the challenge. It's why adapting traditional music is so much more difficult than just writing an original song. You know, I feel like I could write something that just makes much more sense and feels much more like a real old song if I just did it myself and didn't worry about the source material, because the source material is always weird, it's always strange. But that's kind of the fun of it. I find the weirdness and the eccentricity is what makes it fascinating. particularly as often it's telling you things about the past that are unexpected, that suggest that it's much more similar to the present than you might have thought. That's really the fun part for me. By the way, for complicated reasons, I can't actually include the music video in this episode, but there will be a link to it at the end. If you want a sneak peek now, or if you'd like to learn even more about how it was made, there's links in the description. Anyway, on with the show. So I went deep down the rabbit hole into what this ballad is about, who I think wrote it, and why. Too deep to keep this video to a reasonable length, although I'll put an extended version out in the world somewhere. But the reason why it was so important is because when I write or adapt a song, I want everything from the vocal melody to the structure to the instrument choices to accentuate the emotion of the song. But in order to do that, I need to know what the emotion is, so I need to know what the song is about. Now, this ballad is about, the songwriter meeting a friend in the street who is lying outside a hospital dying of a venereal disease. The subject matter is dark, but it doesn't feel like it's sensationalized, or at least not by the standards of the time. And that got me wondering, who might have written it and why? It's not exactly your standard broadside fare. Could it be army propaganda to discourage soldiers from visiting sex workers? Or is this just some incel complaining about how it's all women's fault? I never really settled on a definitive answer, but in the process I came to realize what I actually loved about this song was a bit more abstract and fuzzy. It's really just a big, juicy, epic kind of gothic memento mori. In other words, a reminder that life is short and precious. So that's what I lent into. So let's think about the arrangement. What instruments are we going to use? Well, something that I would really like to do is to ask my friends on the local folk scene to collaborate on these tracks, seeing as collaboration is such an important part of this genre. It's kind of easier said than done, though. What I would ideally like is for them to be in the videos, but that's kind of an ask. I think if someone was to ask me that, I'd be pretty self-conscious about it. There's also the slightly weird thing of payment. Musicians should be paid, and when I've collaborated with friends in the past, I've often paid people, even if it's a bit weird. But on the other hand, if I'm doing something on someone else's project, usually, if it's just kind of like a local music thing, I don't want to take money. I'm actually far more interested in whether or not I think the result's going to be good enough to be worth my time, to be brutally honest. Anyway, this weekend is a good opportunity to find this out, because Oxford has a thriving folk session scene. Folk sessions are basically folk music jam sessions, and they'll be like the third Monday of every month. And every once in a while, there just happens to be a sort of long weekend where there's so many sessions that it almost forms a mini festival. We've taken to calling it the half marathon. So tonight is the Friday night session that I run. Tomorrow afternoon is the LGBTQ session. The day after, Sunday lunchtime, is the coffee shop session. Sunday evening is Trad Irish. Monday evening is the sing around. Anyway, I'll see who I can talk to and see if something comes out of it.
Right, the morning after the Friday night session. I think I might be able to get Joe on board to play some bagpipes. We'll see how it goes.
I'm going to try and demonstrate. I didn't have a tune, but I thought I would write a tune that sounded like the traditional tunes. So I started out with something. It was when I was writing that I was like, this is where it gets boring. This is where the song kind of slips out from under me. But I sort of felt like, well, this is kind of how it's done. And then I thought, I'll try something different. And I ended up rewriting it, and I was so glad that I did. And I started mulling on like why I'd gone with that very traditional sound and what problem I had with it, because I do have a problem with it. And I think one of the key things is every fucking traditional song, every traditional English song sounds like that. That's fundamentally the problem. I'm not entirely sure why. I think maybe people would sing them to all sorts of different tunes, but the standard tune, and sometimes the one that's referenced underneath the title in the broadside ballad, can be played with just 2 chords. Okay, so what I'm going to try and demonstrate is there's this particular kind of tune which can be sung over just 2 chords. And I wonder if it was written deliberately so that people could play along if they only knew 2 chords, perhaps on a cittern or kind of proto guitar or something. So, Ransom will roar like true British sailors. Ransom will roar all on the salt seas until we reach soundings in the channel of old England. From Usher to Scilly, it's 35 leagues. You find a lot of songs like that, and every once in a while that's fine. If you want to reflect the sound of the times, that's the sound to go for. But if you want to make your songs distinctive, coherent, and sound good, you're cutting your legs off at the knees with this, because every song sounds the same. Every song has the same emotion. And actually that emotion kind of works for Young Man Cut Down on His Prime, but it just sounds like every other song. Now that I think about it, collaborating is a part of this process that I was kind of dreading, because it's not in my control. You know, you've got to deal with other people and other people's schedules. So I booked a session with Joe to record the bagpipe part. We only had an hour, and he just nailed it and just made everything easy. He turned up with a guitar case on his back with 3 different sets of bagpipes in. And he sat down and he said, okay, from what you've been talking about, as in, like, he said this to me, from what you've been talking about, it seems like the thing you really want to nail is this solo section, the kind of instrumental bit. Let's just do that first. Let's just do a few takes until you feel like you've got what you want. Then why don't I just record a drone and you can sample that and do whatever you want with it. And then, depending on how much time we've got, let's just go back to the beginning and I'll just play along and improvise all the way through again and again until we run out of time. And that's what he did. And a good example of how Joe made everything easy is, it sort of hadn't occurred to me. He was just about to pack up and he was like, hey, take a picture of the pipes for the YouTube video. So collaborations, yeah, they can be a pain in the ass to organize. They weren't at all in this case. And they can just bring so much that you couldn't do yourself. Not only could I not play the instrument, I couldn't have got that kind of atmosphere, which I did feel like this track needed. I felt like it needed pipes. Pipes are referenced in the lyrics, but also it just felt right. And I'm so happy with the result. I haven't gone in and actually pieced his takes together and built something out of it, but this is how you can tell if you're a recording nerd. I cannot wait to take all of these different takes, line them all up, get them all cut and edited and crafted and polished. I love doing that. So yeah, collaborations, yay.
Again, I had way more to say about this section than I can reasonably put in this video, so I'll try to summarize most of it. I started by thinking about what visual imagery I was going to use, and then I had some decisions to make about where I was going to film my performance. Was it going to be in the boat against a green screen, or in town against the backdrop of the ancient city walls? In the end, for a bunch of reasons, I kind of compromised and took photos of the backdrop and then used a green screen. But then it came time to decide what to use for the bulk of the visuals, and I opted for using generative AI. I had enough to say on generative AI to fill this entire video and more, so I'll just show a clip of it. And I'll preface this clip by saying elsewhere, I talked a lot about how I believe generative AI companies are ripping off creators and that needs to stop, and also how it's already taking people's jobs. But here, I'm going to talk about some of the positives, just because I found them so surprising.
If you had asked me years ago to predict what generative AI art was going to be like, if you told me years ago, there's going to be this new set of tools in the toolbox that will use artificial intelligence, machine learning to create artistic things, and you'd ask me to describe how that was going to work, I think I would have put quite a bit of money on the fact that it would be very good at reproducing details of reality, but it would not be great on reproducing the soul of art, on like atmosphere, on vibes. what I find so fascinating is it's kind of the other way around. You know, generative AI art is really bad on detail. Midjourney is a good example. Give Midjourney, try and, you know, ask Midjourney to draw a hand, and Midjourney will be like, oh, hands, yeah, okay. Like, fingers are a big thing, aren't they? I know this one. All right. How many fingers are there on a hand? Is it like 6, 5? It's that kind of number, isn't it? Midjourney's not great with detail. But if you give Midjourney some sort of really artistic problem, if you say to it, okay, I want the stillness and serenity of a Vermeer painting, but in a hen-do in the back of a limo. Midjourney will be like, sorry, you want what? There you go. And, you know, I'll look at it and be like, how did you do this? I gave you an impossible brief and you solved it in seconds. Now, that may seem kind of dispiriting that it's able to do such a human thing. But when I first started writing songs, like as a kid, I assumed that like, the best songs were the ones that were political or saying something about society and like big issues. And then I came to the conclusion, you know what, there's other things that do that better. You know, academia, journalism, that if you want to make that kind of point, music is more interesting in exploring emotion and atmosphere, and the word I'm using a lot, vibes. And it's been trying to kind of explore vibes in music that I felt like I haven't been good enough at doing, that I find difficult. Translating an emotion into an atmosphere is just hard. And to be clear, I don't feel like generative AI art gives me the whole thing, gives me a whole artwork. And I wouldn't be particularly interested if it did. But what it's really good at doing is that specific thing of translating an idea into an atmosphere. I'll give you an example. I use a lot of B-roll of the canals and rivers of Oxford, which is kind of my world. And that's a good way of sort of capturing the atmosphere in B-roll in these videos. But in a music video, it wouldn't be enough. Let's say I wanted a scene which had the perfect sunset in it. Now, as I've said many times, I'm not like a cinematographer, I'm not a videographer, I'm not great with photography. The challenge of me getting a perfect sunset would be, okay, I have to work out when golden hour is, I'd have to pick a day where it's clear sky, I'd have to negotiate childcare, I only have a small amount of time, I'd have to turn up, I'd have to find what camera to use, I don't have expensive cameras at the moment, I'm not interested in expensive cameras, I'd probably mess something up, I probably would under or overexpose it, I wouldn't notice there's something in the frame that kind of ruins it, and even if all of those conditions were right, I'd probably get a sunset that was fine. The thing about Midjourney is if I ask for a perfect sunset, or if I just ask for a sunset, for Midjourney, a perfect sunset is like the default. That's what it will give you unless you ask it not to. It's so influenced by human aesthetics, by what we find appealing. And that I find so fascinating, and that I just love exploring. And this video particularly, Young Man Cut Down on His Prime, has been the thing that just really opened my eyes to, wow, I had a bunch of ideas in my head that I thought would be cool to put in a video. And I was able to nail all of them. I'm just trying to think, there was one little thing in this video that I felt like I couldn't get. And even then I think I found a fix for it. The previous one, already on to the next thing, was a bit more challenging, as I mentioned, kind of running up against the Midjourney barriers. But this video just really struck me. For a song and for a music video that's just about vibes, this is just such a game changer. Now, just to kind of prepare you for this video, I think something you'll notice with all the videos I've done so far, they are amateurish. Like, you're not going to look at them and think this was a professional video made by, you know, a professional video team. You can't see the like thousands or tens of thousands of pounds on the screen. This is clearly a one-man band. I don't mind that. The thing that I want to be able to do is just get a sense of the vibes, of the atmosphere. And I have been absolutely blown away by how much easier generative AI has made it. And I'll again come back to this thing of, I don't feel like I can really relax using this until the IP situation is at least kind of sorted out. It's a big challenge, and lawmaking, I think all around the world at the moment, is not exactly a golden age right now. So I don't know, I'm keeping my fingers crossed on that. But I think it's coming down to the fact that my take on generative AI is, for the very particular thing that it does, it's mind-blowing and I love it. The video was actually done quite a while ago, and I've spent my time recently doing the previous episode song already onto the next thing. I mixed them around this time. Yeah, it was kind of a delight to do, and I wasn't sure whether or not I was even going to do generative AI art for this particular song. I was thinking about what's the movement of this song. You know, a very good music video is kind of a dance video. Then what is moving in time to the music? And I thought this is kind of a funeral procession. So with that funeral procession idea, I thought, I mean, I don't know how to get that sort of atmosphere, even using generative AI art. Do I use stop motion or something? One idea I had was maybe I use Google Earth and I take real shots of street locations using Google Earth, and then use Midjourney to kind of, and then maybe composite like action figures or something, and build a scene out of that, which would have been crazy complicated, and Google Earth doesn't have that kind of resolution on street level, so that wasn't going to work. But just going into Midjourney and saying, okay, what can this give me? Well, I want this particular atmosphere, and then finding very quickly, wow, like every kind of atmospheric image I'm looking for is better than I would have imagined. It was also the case that once I took the Midjourney images that were then turned into the Pika Labs video clips, and then I put them into Final Cut Pro, I thought, right, here the hard work really begins. But it wasn't really that arduous. Quite quickly I was able to go, okay, that goes there, that goes there, and then I was like, okay, I need a little bit more for this bit in the middle, and then I generated that, and then I was like, oh, it's done. Oh, I also want to mention, so I did Midjourney to generate the images, I used Pika Labs to generate the moving clips, but I also used layer picks, I think it's called, for essentially taking a still image and giving it a sense of movement via perspective, but it's not like the things are moving, it's more like the camera is moving. And once you see that particular style, you're like, oh, okay, fair enough, all these images are using the same trick. But what it allows you, I mean, I felt like moving the camera on still images really worked for the mood of this particular song, but also you get much more detail. The video opens with a shot of what I think of as like the singer, his father. It opens with his face, and every time that happens, I'm like, oh wow. In fact, you know what? Let's talk about what went well. Yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot about generative AI and how that worked. I was really blown away by on this one, and also particularly, I really feel like this is great for traditional music, because so many of the images that I'm looking for will hopefully be based on images that are long out of copyright in the public domain. And I feel like there's so much to play with there. So yeah, that's something I kind of feel better about. I've talked a lot about the video as well. In terms of what went well, I was really happy with how the track turned out. And I was also really happy with the decision to not write a melody that is in keeping with most folk songs, because, as I mentioned, it becomes so difficult to make it distinctive and to give it its own distinctive emotion. I feel like the resulting song is what I was looking for. It's not quite a folk song, but it still feels like it sounds kind of, I suppose I think of it as, it feels to me as accurate as a good Hollywood historical drama does. And that's kind of what I'm aiming for, because I think there's a place for really nerding out and doing essentially historical reenactment. That's not what I'm super interested in doing myself. So I feel like there's this space that no one else is really occupying of, let's take old traditional material and let's try and do it in a way that doesn't put all of the work onto the audience, if that makes sense. So yeah, I was happy with how it came out. I really like the percussion. I really like the sort of timpani roll at the beginning and the kind of military snare. I feel like the emotion kind of worked well. Also, something I was really happy with was the collaboration with Joe Wass. He turned up here and just nailed it, I think. And that made such a difference. His bagpipe solo in the middle, I think really is just filled a hole I wouldn't be able to fill myself. Should we talk about what went badly? Yeah, I mean, as with the last couple of videos, I feel like the more I look, the more problems I see. Green screen, I still haven't really figured out. I think I haven't appreciated how much light you need to have when doing green screen. Hopefully that's something I'm going to keep working at. In terms of generative AI,
I've looked at the clips enough times that I can spot, oh yeah, here's this thing that just looks weird, and here's this person with like 18 fingers or whatever. But again, for this song particularly, I feel like that kind of fits. It's all kind of a horrific nightmare, I think, which is what I was looking for. Yeah, that's kind of my brand. It's all kind of a horrific nightmare, and that's what I'm looking for. That should be my LinkedIn tagline. Well, I did that whole bit earlier, covering this in much more detail, and I'm not going to go through all that again. So I would just kind of loosely summarize by saying, despite all of the thorny ethical and legal issues, which might scupper this for me, you know, if I feel like this is ripping people off, I will stop doing it. And that might well happen. But despite that, I really enjoyed it, particularly on this video. I was really happy with the results. I never would have believed that like a one-person operation would be able to get something which, filled with flaws as it is, not just captured the emotion and atmosphere I was looking for, but exceeded it. And for traditional music particularly, I can't wait to play with this again. Once again, thanks again for making it all the way to the end. It's been a journey. Right. Young man cut down on his prime. Let's watch the video.